move to reassure Hoosiers that their religious freedoms are intact. This week, Governor Mike Pence signed the controversial RFRA, or Religious Freedom Restoration Act, into law. The legislation, which has been strongly backed by the governor, gives Hoosier business people the right to deny services to any party if they feel that providing those services violates their religious beliefs. The Republican champion bill passed through the General Assembly largely along party lines. House Minority Leader Scott Pelas says that rather than guaranteeing religious freedoms in the Hoosier state, the bill is more likely to have the opposite effect.
The effects of it are surely unintended. The effects that we'll expect to see, it's going to be a litigation nightmare. It's going to be a lawyer's bill of rights. But I think what's most troubling is the immediate effects that we do see, and that's again dividing people along moral, spiritual, ethical, cultural, philosophical lines, really just in order to stoke the flames of the passions among a few on the extreme right. That's very troubling.
There may be economic repercussions for the state. Gen Con's popular gaming convention and the company's sales force, among others, have already or are threatening to take their business out of the Hoosier state. Opponents say that in adopting the RFRA, Indiana is taking a giant step backward in the fight for civil rights. This week, Governor Pence also signed the Right to Try bill into law. The new law gives terminally ill patients access to experimental drugs that are not yet on the market years before they receive federal approval. Patients desperate for treatment advocated for the bill because the approval process for most drug regimens can take about 10 to 15 years to complete. Though doctors must sign off on any treatments, the law protects medical professionals from liability. The experimental drug should be considered a last-ditch effort to improve a patient's condition or disease. 8 other states have either adopted or approved similar laws. The Jasper County Economic Redevelopment Organization, or JCEDO, has a new director of tourism and community relations. The new director, Sheila White, has been working for the Jasper County Hospital in Rensselaer for the past 16 years. She currently serves as director of community relations and development at the hospital. White will primarily be responsible for promoting Jasper County tourism, lodging, attractions, entertainment, festival, and events. She'll also be working to foster better business relationships in the region.
We like to work with all the small businesses in the area, and as well as attract new businesses and events. The tourism part is going to focus primarily on events, festivals, different things that can bring people who don't necessarily have other reasons to come to Jasper County, to bring them here.
White, who has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Purdue University, starts work at the Jasper County Economic Development Organization on April 10th. A tireless advocate for the state of Indiana has announced that he is stepping down. Republican Senator Dan Coates said this week that he will retire from the United States Senate at the end of his term. The senator, who has a reputation for reaching across party lines, is an Army veteran who has served in both the U.S. House and Senate and as ambassador to Germany. Governor Mike Pence says that few Hoosiers have made a greater contribution to Indiana or the nation in public service. Senator Coates, who serves on the Senate's Finance Committee, the Select Intelligence Committee, and the Joint Economic Committee, said he struggled with the decision to vacate his office.
This was not an easy decision. While I believe I am well positioned to run a successful campaign for another 6-year term, I have concluded that the time has come to pass this demanding job to the next generation of leaders. I am grateful to God and to Hoosiers who allowed me to serve my state and my country.
While there's much speculation about who will run for Coates' vacated seat, at least one politician has already announced his candidacy. Coates' aide and former state Republican Party chairman Eric Holcomb has officially thrown his hat into the ring. This past week, a Northwest Indiana basketball team saw its Final Four dreams slip away. The 14th-seeded Valparaiso University Crusaders men's basketball team fell to number 3 ranked Maryland 62-65 at Nationwide Arena in Columbus, Ohio. As teams all over the country continue elimination play, the Hoosier State is gearing up to host the Final Four matchup April 4 through 6 at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. It's not all bad news for Valpo this week. Men's head basketball coach Bryce Drew has been named a finalist for the 2015 Hugh Durham National Coach of the Year Award. The honor is presented annually to the nation's top mid-major coach. A major global problem hits home in Northwest Indiana, and the region says goodbye to one of its own. Those stories, plus Steve Walsh, coming up next.
Lakeshore Report wants to hear from you. Send your thoughts, concerns, questions, and story ideas to tvfeedback@lakeshorepublicmedia.org. You can also reach us on Facebook and Twitter at Lakeshore Report. Make sure to tweet us using the hashtag NWIPride and you may see your comments on air. Lakeshore Report, providing you region-focused content.
There's always a lot of hoopla about college basketball this time of year with the NCAA's Final Four games being held right here in the state. But there's some other activities spiking in the state, and local law enforcement is keeping track. Lakeshore Report's Hillary Powell finds out how safety officials are focusing on the tourism industry to get tough on sex trafficking.
With 4 major interstates that cut through the region and some 6,000 hotel rooms, Northwest Indiana is truly a place where people come and go, but there's a lingering problem that goes on behind closed hotel room doors.
I think what I want people to realize is that it's happening everywhere. It's happening in our communities, it's happening in our places of employment, and none of us are immune to it.
She's talking about human trafficking, a form of modern-day slavery where victims are traded and perpetrators profit. It's an illegal venture, and victim advocates like Dobney say help can come in an unlikely form.
Okay, so this isn't just it.
At a hotel front desk. At a recent training led by the South Shore Convention and Visitors Authority, hotel owners from across the region were trained to look for warning signs that a guest checking in could be a pimp or a John. Like if an adult checks in with a minor who does not share their last name, or if that young person calls the adult boyfriend or daddy. Hoteliers should also be on alert if a minor is staying in a room during school hours. Another tip, always ask about tattoos to spark conversation and see if a guest is uneasy to talk about them. It could be a pimp's way to brand his girls.
Anyone who's in a direct service anything is ripe to identify victims of trafficking. And so because you have hotel front desk people who are interacting with pretty much everyone who comes in the building, if trafficking is happening in the building, they're at least seeing it, and so we need them to be aware of it so that they can identify when it is trafficking.
Law enforcement experts say they commonly conduct informal cold visits to hotel rooms as a preventative measure.
We just explained to them that, hey, we're a local law enforcement agency, name and title, this is who we are. We've had some complaints about traffic coming to or from your room. We'd like to come in and talk to you about some of the things that are going on.
More than 210 cases of human trafficking have been reported in Indiana since 2007, according to the Indiana Attorney General's office. Public safety experts say hotels along major interstates like I-94 serve as common truck routes and can be prone to trafficking people, not just goods.
Whenever you look for trafficking, you find it all over. I think Lake County has a lot of factors that make it vulnerable to having lots of people trafficked throughout the area, especially with the truck routes.
That's why the Indiana Attorney General's office spearheaded a campaign this month to place 35 digital billboards along roadways throughout the state to raise awareness about human trafficking. 13 is the average age children in Indiana are pulled into this lifestyle, according to the Attorney General's office. They hope by placing these billboards throughout Northwest Indiana in places like Gary and here in Highland, those individuals will pass by these signs, look up, and see some life-saving information. The message will run through April 6th to target the tide of basketball fans coming into the state for the NCAA Division I championship events happening in Indianapolis. In Highland, Hillary Powell, Lakeshore Report.
For more information about how to get help for victims of trafficking or for a list of more warning signs, log on to our website, lakeshorepublicmedia.org. Longtime Indiana House Representative Earl Harris of East Chicago died this week after a long illness. In honor of his passing, Governor Mike Pence directed flags at state facilities in Lake County and at the Indiana State House to be flown at half-staff. Funeral services have been set for this weekend at the St. Mark AME Zion Church in the 4200 block of Alder Street in East Chicago. Lakeshore reporter Stephen Lattimore takes a look at Representative Harris' career in the State House and has reaction from people who knew him well.
Here in East Chicago, Representative Earl Harris is being remembered as a skilled legislator, someone who was humble but effective and who always got the job done.
Dad said, that has to go up in the living room next to President. I said, no problem, baby.
The family of Indiana State Rep Earl Harris is dealing with the loss of their husband and father. Harris died Monday after 3 long years battling cancer. Harris was in the Indiana State House for 33 years. At one time, he held the #2 position in the State House.
It's been great hearing such wonderful stories about my father and what people thought of him, the respect they had for him, and also people who shared stories with us about things that he did that we didn't even know. How he was very helpful, how he's helped a lot of people in terms of their career.
On the House floor, his fellow legislators poured out their hearts in remembrance of their friend.
Even his last day, he was thinking about doing work for the district and for individuals in the district. And that was a unique characteristic of Earl Harris that shall be remembered.
It's painful to see people go. And I thank God that he didn't have to suffer that way. I thank God that he didn't have to go that way. I'm going to miss him. I feel the void, but I know he's in a better place.
His knowledge was so broad. The one thing he knew how to do is to calm the storms and bring the ship home.
Indiana House Democratic leader Scott Pilaf says he learned a lot about politics from Representative Harris.
Earl was a first-rate lawmaker, a great thinker, and he was a visionary. And that's mostly what I want people to know and remember about Earl. Earl thought big, particularly when it came to Northwest Indiana.
Senate President Pro Temp David Long, Republican of Fort Wayne, said of State Rep Harris, he says Harris was a strong, thoughtful, and effective voice for Northwest Indiana for many years. At the same time, he was also a fierce advocate for his constituents. He leaves a distinguished legacy here at the State House, and he will be greatly missed. In Northwest Indiana, current political leaders who watched Harris when they were younger are grateful that he opened doors for them so they could now become leaders of today.
I would describe him certainly as a statesman, as someone who was well respected, not just in the Indiana General Assembly, but who was respected throughout Northwest Indiana, who clearly had who wielded a lot of influence in the legislature as a member of the Ways and Means. And the thing that stuck out to me when I would go to Indianapolis is that clearly Democrats are in the minority, but it didn't seem to matter in terms of who listened to him, how much influence he had, and he was one who really wielded that influence responsibly.
East Chicago Mayor Anthony Copeland describes Harris as a man who fixed things, not as a man who broke things. Remember when Klein Avenue was torn up because of the harsh winter? Representative Harris called the governor. He never told anyone the road just got fixed. We also found out something that a lot of people didn't know about Representative Harris.
When I was a youngster, I had musical ambitions, and I thought I was good. I had a line of music, so I formed a group, and we decided that we wanted to get on a label. We decided to audition and was accepted, and we kind of turned the place out. So right on the spot, I was given a contract. Now, that was the good part. The bad part was, I don't know, I was a little tempted, so I didn't sign it.
So what happens next here? Well, within 30 days, a caucus of the precinct committee people from this district will meet, and they will pick the new representative from this area. In East Chicago, Stephen Lattimore, Lakeshore Report.
Military service veterans looking for their next career move might be getting some help from the Indiana General Assembly. A local veterans employment specialist says that's just one way to help ex-military get back to work. This week he sat down with Lakeshore Report's Steve Walsh.
The Indiana General Assembly seems poised to pass legislation that would allow private employers to give preferences to veterans similar to the preferences allowed in the public sector. It seemed like a good time to look at the issues of unemployment among Indiana veterans. To talk about it, we have Bob Carnegie, who is a veterans employment specialist who works with the Indiana National Guard. Bob, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Sure. So, recent testimony before the Indiana General Assembly listed the unemployment rate for post 9/11 veterans nationwide at about 9%, which is pretty high in and of itself. But in Indiana, it's 16.9%. So it's incredibly high in Indiana. Does that mirror your experience, what you're seeing out there?
Absolutely. We've seen numbers even higher than that from time to time. I think that it's a mixture of, one, there's so many National Guardsmen in the state of Indiana, and two, that means the number of what I would call less experienced or young folks who've come right out of high school and gone into the Guard without a lot of advanced training is a larger number.
So you've got a lot of young veterans now, because the National Guard got a lot younger over the last 12 years or so.
Absolutely.
All right. But, I mean, everybody says they want to hire veterans. I mean, I'd be hard-pressed to find an employer who would come out and say, no, I don't want to hire veterans. So this seems like, in many ways, like this be an incredibly easy task.
Sometimes I feel it is. You make a phone call and all of a sudden they just open up like a flower and say, what do you have? Send them over, and those kinds of things. But it also means that the skill sets have to be right also. They're just not going to hire anybody who walks in the door. So because they have less experience, we've got to help them understand how to translate that military experience into civilianese.
So when you talk about somebody who has no experience because they're a young veteran, but in fact they actually have a lot of skills that probably would translate to a lot of different employers.
Absolutely, that's correct. They're running some very large pieces of equipment or heavy machinery, et cetera, and it may not be the same thing that's in that business or in that industry, but certainly demonstrates their ability to learn how to do it.
But there are some companies that there's a certain trepidation that they don't want to hire veterans. There's a certain fear out there. Have you run across that at all?
Yes, you can tell when you have conversations with people. They may tell you yes, but you've got to have a really, like a bow and arrow, to get the right person in the right location, because if there's any wavering from the skill set, they're not going to be as cooperative as it may seem. And sometimes there's hidden agendas. Sometimes it's just obvious that you need that skill set to work on this job.
So you've seen some roadblock. And why do you think that is? Why do you think that reluctance is there?
Well, I think that sometimes our soldiers are not prepared to have that kind of dialogue like you and I are having right this minute in a career perspective, because they haven't been in that before. Their experience to get into the Guard wasn't nearly this type of a give and take. And so they can't articulate as well as they should. And so that's one of the things we do is help coach them. And then we have those employers who are extremely reluctant. Even though they may say yes, they are reluctant and have fears in the back of their mind.
Now, there are a couple different bills moving through the General Assembly. They've had pretty wide support. They're assuming that one of these is going to pass maybe within the next week or so. And it would allow, if you're a private employer, you can give a preference for veterans. I guess before you can do this at the federal level, they require you to do this at the state level. So Indiana wants to become one of those states that allows that preference. Do you think that's going to help?
Absolutely. I know that in the state of Indiana, the Lieutenant Governor's office has projects where they'd go visit companies around the state, encouraging them to become part of a program that allows the veteran to get a leg up. Doesn't give them a job, it gives them an opportunity. And it also educates the employer that they have a whole host of people in the pool that have some special skills, some special capabilities, and they become more cognizant of looking for that veteran when they're hiring.
Well, that's a good place to end right there. Bob Carnegie, he's a Veterans Employment Specialist. He works with the Indiana National Guard. Bob, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for the opportunity to share our story.
Twice a month, Lakeshore Report teams up with the Society of Innovators of Northwest Indiana to showcase some of the most forward-thinking ideas and people the region has to offer. This week, the Times editor emeritus, William Nagel, tells us how the local paper evolved to become neighborhood relevant and set a national standard.
The innovation was really two issues. One was establishment of zoned neighborhood editions in 9 geographic areas of Northwest Indiana, so that the Times was able to cover minor community news, PTA, and all that kind of thing, in each of those neighborhoods, while at the same time being a regional newspaper. It became known as the Munster model around the country. The Munster model was established 1990, the Times had a solid foothold in Westlake County. The goal was to become likewise in Eastlake County and Porter County. And so what we did is did massive sampling. Sometimes we had block parties, all sorts of things to introduce the Times to people in various neighborhoods. And when we had a substantial number of subscribers in that zone, we would move on to the next one. By the end of the 1990s, we were the largest newspaper in Northwest Indiana, including Lake, Porter counties, and then we also have circulation in Illinois. Second thing was there had been complaints about people having difficulty accessing records, government records. We went to every one of the 92 counties requesting the same 5 records that by law are public. You don't have to identify yourself for these public records. The innovation was to do that, which then led to the governor appointing a public access counselor. If a public record is not made available, the individual public official can be fined substantially. And they can go to court and get the court to order it opened. That process has been duplicated in over 30 of the states now. Journalism groups determined that Indiana has the most access to public records of any state in the country. It was a significant thing in Indiana. I was at the Times for 44 years and the editor for about 30, I guess. And so it's been rewarding to see how it really has grown substantially. It's the second largest newspaper in Indiana now.
For more information about the Society of Innovators, visit www.nwisoi.org. Don't forget, you can find out more about these and other local stories by going to lakeshorepublicmedia.org. We'd also like to invite you to check out our new Whitney Reynolds show, airing Monday nights at 6:30 and at 10:30 a.m. Sunday mornings. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see you next time on Lakeshore Report.
Hi, joining me for this edition of Eye on the Arts is Jeff Brown, founder of the Valparaiso University Jazz Festival. And what a wonderful festival it is, Jeff.
Well, thank you so much. It's our 30th year.
Yeah.
And we're celebrating.
Well, congratulations. That's quite a milestone.
Thank you very much. We have quite a lineup.
Well, tell us about it.
Well, it's the 6th through the 11th of April. Mm-hmm. And on Monday and Tuesday, we have literally 300 high school students coming to perform. They're from Portage, Knox, and Hobart, Valparaiso, Couts, and Lowell, and Chesterton. Okay. And Wednesday evening, we have the Faculty Jazz Trio with our new pianist, Roger Harris, who Billy Foster retired. And we're going to have the Northwest Indiana Jazz Educator Big Band, which is made up of band directors from Lake, Porter, and the Port counties, doing a lot of the literature, some of it that they teach and some of it more advanced. Yeah. On Thursday evening, Tom Bones Malone. Now, he was in the Blues Brothers. Oh, wow. And he's in the CBS Orchestra in Chicago, not in Chicago, in New York. Uh-huh. And he plays trombone and literally 11 other instruments as well. Wow. And he'll be soloing with the VU Jazz Ensemble. Mm-hmm. And on Friday, Marcus Roberts, an excellent, phenomenal jazz pianist. In fact, CBS 60 Minutes did a special on him last year, and it was hosted by Wynton Marsalis.
Oh, fantastic.
And it was an incredible piece. And then our signature great concert is Natalie Cole on Saturday evening.
Wow, that's a big finish then.
For sure.
So all of this is at the Hari Union?
The Hari Union's hosting it Monday through Friday. Okay. And then we needed a larger venue.
I would think, yeah.
It's going to be in the ARC, the Athletic Recreation Center. We're going to put a stage in there. We're going to have an excellent sound company. And we're going to make it, the acoustics in there, the best that it could possibly be.
And you're the founder of all of this.
Yes.
You create and you produce it year after year. Mm-hmm. And you've brought amazing talent to Northwest Indiana. And I didn't realize that all of these high schools had jazz programs.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
And it's this area, Northwest Indiana has some of the finest jazz educators in the high schools around. So they're very strong programs, and that's why Monday and Tuesdays is very important.
Yeah.
And they do a great job, and they have a good time because it's a non-competitive environment, and they're not adjudicated like they are so much of the time.
Well, thank you for being here to tell us about it. Congratulations, and thank you for watching. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Eye on the Arts. Eye on the Arts is made possible in part by South Shore Arts, the Indiana Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts, a federal agency.